Have you ever said to yourself, I'll start taking care of my health once everything slows down, once the stress of business and family gets a little bit easier to manage, only to find yourself days, weeks, months, or even years down the line without really making any meaningful change in your fitness and health? If you're someone who's stuck in the perpetual cycle of putting off taking care of yourself, this podcast is for you. My name is Brian Pickowitz.
And I'm Lindsay Pickowitz, and we're the head coaches and the co-founders at The Fitness Project, where we focus on building fit and healthy leaders. Now, in this conversation, we are going to share with you something called the Law of Diminishing Intent. And we're going to share with you why you keep repeating the same cycle of saying, I'm going to start on X date, and then not following through. We're going to give you some clarity, and we're also going to make it so that you have the tools ready and handy so that the next time this happens and you start promising yourself future actions without actually making the commitment, you know exactly what to do to ensure that you do indeed follow through. Now, this conversation is coming as a result of a conversation I had last week with a client who just started working with us at the Fitness Project. So funny. There's so many different things I could share about this story, but essentially, to boil it down, she and I were having a conversation about her health and her wellness. She had not actually consistently made progress in 20 years. She felt like she had been starting, stopping, trying different things, and she just wasn't making any gains, we'll say, towards her ultimate outcome since 20 years ago. That's really hard. Right? It's hard to recommit and restart again after so many years. So if it's been 20 years for you, we've got you here. But for a lot of you, it's probably 6 months, a year. So maybe you can even feel more inspired by this story if it's been less than 20 years. So that said, it's been 20 years since she felt like she'd actually committed and gone all in and achieved her goal. And now at this point, she felt like she was really unhealthy. She felt like she was 100 pounds away from really where she wanted to be. And so it felt like a mountain in front of her. Now, as we went through this conversation, we progressed through her goals, why it was meaningful, why it was impactful for her to really start again. And also why it would be really painful to wait, even a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line. So she came to the decision and said, okay, it's time to get started. But then once we had the financial discussion, then her mind started to say, well, maybe 2 months from now, it would be way better. So to that, I replied, have you ever heard of the Law of Diminishing Intent? And she had not. So if you haven't either, this is going to be very eye-opening. Basically, and we'll pop it up on the screen so you can see this graphic. Having a visual is really helpful. So I was like, okay, listen. The law of diminishing intent is powerful. It is a universal law, similar to the 80-20 principle, Pareto's principle, where 20% of your effort creates 80% of your result. Now, the law of diminishing intent shows that over time, our intent diminishes. And this happens to all of us. Think about some idea that you had for dinner, but you never actually bought the ingredients. You never actually told the family that's what you were having. Did you ever actually make that dinner? A very simple example. But we have ideas all the time. We have these little sparks of motivation and inspiration. You can apply it to business. You can apply it to random examples like I just gave. But all of us have the same tendency. As we put things off, we slowly lose our motivation. Now, we're going to talk about why this happens, but essentially for this particular client, as I explained this, she was like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to fall victim to that. So essentially, cutting to the chase, we ended up figuring out how we could get her started at a smaller capacity, give her some level of commitment so she could actually start. But basically, as we crack this open, you need to understand that the law of diminishing intent has a lot of power over us. And so you can have all the juice in the world, all the motivation, inspiration, but when it actually comes down time to make a decision, a lot of us want to delay it with the false hope that we'll still be as motivated 2 months from now.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that? What does that actually
Well, and
look
coming back to the way the principle works, it's really the distance between the idea or the emotion and your action. The more distance there is, the less likely you're to do it.
Correct.
So if I notice that, hey, I want to tell an employee they're doing a great job today because I saw them do this one thing, but I got 5 things I need to do, it doesn't mean that I have to automatically task off and go and do that. But if I don't write a note down, if I don't put it in my phone, if I don't say, hey, remind Julia that she did a great job with this client, if I don't do something that captures the idea, the likelihood that in 3 hours I will remember is unlikely. If I, and you can think about it in this way, imagine that you think about your health. Let's think about a painful experience, right? The distance between the painful experience and, let's say, you setting the goal, the more that distance stretches out, the less likely you are to follow through. Here's a great example. Let's say that you had to go for a hike with someone. And let's say it's a 2,000-foot hike. So not 4,000, right? Let's say it's 2,000. That's a nice little, like, mid-tier hike. And you go for a hike and you're like, oh my gosh, I am so exhausted at the end of this. And you tell yourself, oh my God, I really need to make a change. I need to get healthy. I need to get fit. I think we've all been there, right, by the way? So we're in the position where we're seeing, like, man, I'm not really where I want to be. Let's imagine that 2 different scenarios. Scenario 1, you wake up the next day and you say, hey, I got to go for a walk. I got to make sure that the healthy groceries are in the grocery cart. I need to write up my workout schedule. I need to reach out to the coach. I need to reach out to the trainer. I need to do something to move towards my goal of maybe losing 15 pounds and feeling better. That's scenario A. Then scenario B is you still have the same experience where you get done, you feel demoralized, you feel defeated, but instead of doing something about it, you go and eat a full pizza. And then you wake up the next day and you still feel like garbage, but you just sit there and it's Sunday, so it's a relaxing day and I don't really have to do anything. You know what? I'll start again on Monday. Who do you think is going to be more likely to achieve their goal? The person who delays it, who just tolerates it, who accepts the comfort of the status quo, or the person who uses that pain to their advantage and leverages it? We all know that it's going to be person A. So you have to understand that if you have motivation or if you have an emotional experience, the most important thing you can do is lean into it to your advantage. And that reminds me of a principle that Ray Dalio has, which is pain plus reflection equals progress. So if you have a painful experience where you're recognizing that, hey, I'm not really where I want to be, you owe yourself a little bit of reflection time so you can actually get to the point where you're progressing. But if you just have pain and you say, this is pain, this is pain, this is pain, and you don't reflect or do anything, you're always going to stay in that space. And so the first is that we start to tolerate this status quo, right? We say, hey, this is normal. This level of health is normal for me. But there's also this false sense of commitment that we get when we say, hey, I'm going to do this in October, or I'm going to do this when the season gets less stressful. We give ourselves this false sense of commitment without actually changing our behaviors or doing anything that holds us accountable. And when we tell ourselves, maybe a good example is on a Thursday night, let's say we have a bad night of eating. We wake up on Friday and we say, hey, I'm going to get back into the swing of things on Monday. We kind of give ourselves credit for the Monday. And we give ourselves permission for Friday and Saturday to be all out, to be off our diet. So you got to think for yourself, am I giving myself a false sense of commitment by telling myself I'm doing something when I'm actually not? Have I financially invested in the thing that I said I'm going to do? Have I emotionally invested in the thing I said I'm going to do? Have I set myself up to take a daily action that commits me to that? How am I moving towards that target? Or have I just told myself that I'm going to accomplish it so that it doesn't feel as painful right now?
Yeah, and the challenge of telling yourself you're going to do it and then not do it, i.e. fall victim to the law of diminishing intent, is that you start to lose trust with yourself. This is where people get stuck in that mindset of, my word doesn't mean anything, which is really a dangerous place to be because it keeps you from making progress rather than overcoming and saying, okay, I need to build trust with myself again, right? If you've ever heard somebody say, I don't really want to say that because I don't know if I'm actually going to do it, right? Or maybe you've said that yourself. It's because they don't have confidence in themselves. They don't trust their own word. And that's what happens when you don't realize that there is a law of diminishing intent, that over time, your initial spark of motivation is not going to sustain itself, right? Think of it like a spark. It's not a roaring flame. You have to do something about it, right? So mentally and emotionally, it becomes really hard when you aren't aware of or maybe accepting of the fact that this actually does have a lot of power over us. And it's really tempting, right? It's tempting. It's sexy. It sounds like it makes sense to say, I'll start in 2 months. But if you don't actually have the tools in your tool belt that you can whip out and say, oh, not going to let that happen again, then you're going to slowly lose trust with yourself, which is really hard.
And so what do you do, right? If this resonates with you and you're recognizing that maybe you're in that position where you have been delaying, what do you have to do? Well, the first thing is, again, leverage your pain. Leverage your motivation. Use the spark. Do something that holds you to following through. Tony Robbins has a great quote that says, never leave the site of a decision without taking an action, right? So if you say, I need to get healthy, you have to take a decisive action to move in that direction. And that might be reaching out to the trainer or the coach. That might be, hey, I'm going to throw out all the junk food in my house. I'm going to pour out all the alcohol. I'm going to go and sign up at the gym today. I don't care. I'm going to go do it. I don't care if it's 8 p.m. I'm going to show up and do something. Like, think of the power behind you at 8 p.m. saying, oh my God, I feel like such garbage today. And instead of sitting there on Netflix, you put your shoes on and you say, I'm going to try to run a mile.
Right?
I'm going to go and walk. I'm going to do something. You will have more respect for yourself. And if you earn your own respect, change your life. So again, you earned your respect because you are successful in one field. In this field, you got to start proving yourself to yourself. Think of different ways you can do it, but leverage the motivation, leverage the pain, leverage the emotion of this podcast, right? While you're in your ear, don't just sit there. Do something, right? Do something, right? Yeah. So this is the first step. Leverage the motivation, leverage the emotion, get into action.
Yeah. And then really understand that there's a lot of power in small steps too. I know that in the moment, what Brian just described might feel like a massive action, and it is because it has such a high impact, even if it's just go run 1 mile or go for a walk or go drive to the gym, right? Whatever it is. But there is immense power in gaining momentum because that's what small steps do. And we're going to tie this all together with an example, but understand there's power in small steps. And then on top of that, think of it like this. If you are going to get in shape, at some point, you need to start. Mm-hmm. If you have clean clothes that you can put on and go outside for a walk, then you are making progress, right? And taking it a step further, can you create some type of environment that will help you be successful on top of those small little actions that you just took? Can you start to design your environment in a way that encourages you to be consistent? Whether that is you start laying out your clothes at night, or you do hire a coach, or you do get some form of accountability in your life beyond the people that are already there, right? Think, how can I create an environment that fosters my ability to follow through and be consistent?
And then the last piece is don't put off tomorrow what could easily be done today. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of Thomas Jefferson's quotes. Think, is there a way that I can see when I say, I'm going to do that tomorrow, I'm going to start Monday as a trigger for me to do something right now? Can I condition myself to see that as a cue for me to do something small?
Yep.
One of the things I've conditioned myself to do is whenever I notice something that's not clean in the house, I clean it. I used to just be the person who would say, I'll take care of that later. Or someone else take care of that. And it wasn't big things. It would be as simple as, this cup was left in the wrong position. Yep. Or, I noticed that piece of paper, that little piece of paper is on the floor. I got to be the one who picks it up. So I see it as a conditioned response as, I'm just going to take care of it now.
It's a good example.
So you can see the language pattern, the focus, the physiology around, I'll do it later, which probably makes you feel pretty good in the moment. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do it later. Oh, awesome. I don't have to think about it right now. Future Brian's going to be really proud of himself. Yeah. It's like that is a sign I need to do something today.
Yeah, connect them, link it.
Yes, that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, and to all take this all, put it all together, give you that example that we started with at the beginning and tie it all down. This person who ended up becoming a client who initially was trying to put it off by 2 months did all 4 of these things. We said, okay, how you're motivated right now. We just had this beautiful conversation about your goals, the negative impact if you don't get started, and what you're really going to produce, even if you just start small today. So let's capitalize on that. Let's make a decision, right? So we stayed in the pocket of saying we need to do something with this. We can't just say, oh yeah, I'll come back to it. So we stayed in that pocket, and then we said, okay, what's a very small step you can take right now? Let's get a start date on the calendar. Okay, that is a small step because it's not just about you. There's also another person, your coach, who's going to be on the other side of that. And then we said, okay, what can we do to put good people in your corner? Which again, kind of all comes back to the same thing. But she decided to hire us, and she put some skin in the game, and she made that mindset shift. Instead of I'm going to start in 2 months, it's I'm going to start now. So she put a deposit down. She scheduled this kickoff call with her coach. She met her coach on a quick phone call. So she started to actually take all of these tools and put them into play. And you know what? I guarantee that when her start date comes, she's actually going to start because she's actually got skin in the game and she's ready to get started. So you can do that for yourself too, even in small ways. Take these tools that we've taught you, and that way you can actually start to follow through and build self-trust.
So we'd love to see in the comment section, what is your big action? What are you going to do as you leave this podcast? What is your action that you're committed to so you can get momentum to your goal? And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, screenshot this, tag us on your stories, and let us know your big action, your big takeaway. But thank you for being here. We hope this is helpful. We hope that you start getting some momentum towards your goals, and you can go out and conquer your day.
Cheers.
Cheers.